CBSE Board, Class 10, History, Chapter 1, Part 4. This video is created by Rini Matthew. We saw the common ties which decided the members in the aristocratic group. We saw the 4 points also. Please listen to the previous video if you haven't listened to it, and then come to the present one. This powerful aristocratic group was a very small group. It constituted the minority in the society. The majority of the population, as you know, constituted the peasants. Now to the west, the bulk of the land was formed by tenants and small owners who gave their land for rent. But in Eastern and Central Europe, the pattern of landholding was characterized by vast states. And those states were cultivated by serfs. So condition in the west is totally different from the eastern part and the Central Europe. The bulk of the land, the way they held on to the land, everything is different. When you look at industrialization in Western and parts of Central Europe, the growth of industrial population and trade led to the growth of towns and emergence of commercial classes. That happened in the western parts of Central Europe. And that led to the evolution of the market. And this existence was purely based on the production for the market, and it led to the evolution of the market also. So look at the market, the way people traded, and look at how the market looked in those days. Industrialization just began in England in those days, that too in the second half of the 18th century. But in France and in parts of German states, it came very later, that is only in the 19th century. So we know that England was the hub of industrialization. Everything took place there first, and that is how everything was favorable for them to be a colonial empire. So in the wake of industrialization, new social groups also came into being. Because of industrialization, money is flowing in, right? Trade and commerce is also established. So because of that, new social groups came into being. New people started coming into the places. New formations, segregation in the society was there. So what is the new social group? There was a working class population. Then there was middle classes of industrialists. Middle class, of course, were engaged in industries. Then came the businessmen and the professionals. So this was the hierarchy in which it was divided, whether it is horizontal or vertical kind of division, but this constituted or it gave birth to new groups in the society. So in Central and Eastern Europe, these groups that I mentioned just now were very smaller till the 19th century. They did not have much exposure to businessmen and all that. It was among the educated middle class people, liberal people, only among the educated people and the middle class people that ideas of national unity spread. And they wanted to abolish aristocratic privileges also. Because the peasants will not have, exposure. They will not think about all these things. Only thing that they wanted is to live every day without much problems. They just wanted to get their daily bread. That's it. But the educated people, the middle class people started thinking about all these things, and they wanted to put an end to the aristocratic privileges, which was enjoyed by very few people. Now, what did liberal nationalism stand for? We are telling that the middle classes and educated people wanted to promote liberal nationalism. So what is exactly this liberal nationalism? Ideas of unity in early 19th century Europe was closely related to the ideology of liberalism. So national unity, of course, came along with liberalism. That is, some kind of freedom should be there. The term liberalism derives from the Latin root liber, meaning free. For the new middle class, liberalism stood for freedom, complete freedom for the individual and equality of all before the law. So this particular word had different meanings for different classes. For the middle class, it was equality and freedom just before the law for the individual. Okay? Politically, it stressed the concept of government by consent. So politically, it had a different meaning. That is, the concept of government by consent. That is, the government should consult with all the other people before passing laws. So by consent. So since the revolution, liberalism had stood for the end of autocracy. No more ruling of the government by a very few people. Power should not be vested in the hands of few people. And clerical privileges, all these privileges should be put a stop to. There should be the birth of a constitution and a representative government through parliament. Constitution and representative government should shape through the parliament. It should be through the parliament and through the voice of the people. There should be representatives from the common people in the government also. These were some of the changes that the liberals wanted to bring about. So 19th century liberals stressed the inviolability of private property. You should not violate the rules which was put for private property. See, everywhere rules are implemented when it comes to private property, but how many people follows it? So that was the problem in France also. Many were not following it and many people did not know how to go about it also. Now it comes to suffrage and equality. By this picture itself, you'll be able to guess what it stands for. So equality did not stand, when we speak about equality, equality did not comprise of the right to vote. It did not stand for universal suffrage. So we will recall that in revolutionary France, the right to vote and the right to get elected was granted exclusively only to property owning men. That itself is like biased, right? That shows a lot of partiality where only people who have got higher power and property will be allowed to vote or even get elected to represent the people, which was not the correct, it was not justified. So men without property, what did they do? Even the women, they were excluded from political rights. So only for a very brief period under the Jacobins, that is, we had clubs, I told you in the beginning of the chapter. So only for a brief period, the adult males enjoy suffrage. Not always. Because of the clubs, there was a force and pressure on the government to at least allow all the males to enjoy suffrage, that is to vote. But it was only for a brief period of time. It was not followed up later. Now we have to talk about the Napoleonic Code. Do you remember that? Napoleon's right. Napoleon actually told that he wanted to limit the right to vote to all the people, and it reduced the status of the women also to a minor. Of course, subject to the authority of fathers and husbands. He wanted to subject the women to the authority of either father or husband. That is patriarchal system he wanted. It will be easier for him to rule then. But throughout 19th and early 20th centuries, women and non-propertied men organized opposition movements. So when it came to the 19th century, people started responding, they started reacting to it. Non-propertied movements, opposition movements came into being, which demanded equal political rights. They said we should have equal rights for everybody. Why should we limit power to only few people? Now we come to the idea of liberalism. We saw the meaning of liberalism when it comes to middle class. We saw the meaning of liberalism when it comes to the political sphere. Now in the economic sphere, liberalism stood for the freedom of markets, the abolition of state-imposed restrictions on the movement of goods and capital. So when you put together all the principles of economic, political and middle class, we have the total liberalism. So you should study it separately first and then put it together. So freedom of exchange of goods, freedom of having the markets, all this constituted the economic sphere of liberalism. So during the 19th century, there was a great demand of the emerging middle classes. Middle classes wanted to do a lot of things by the 19th century. They were not happy with so many things. They wanted to do different things. And what was that? The demand from the emerging middle class was totally different. What was those demands? Let us take the example of the German-speaking regions. The regions which spoke, majority who spoke German in the first half of the 19th century. So Napoleon had put up a few administrative measures which was created out of countless small principalities, a federation of 39 states. So this was the administrative style of Napoleon, countless small principalities, a confederation of 39 states. So that was the administrative rule of Napoleon. Each of these nations, each of these small regions possessed its own currency and weights and measures. A merchant traveling in 1833 from Hamburg to Nuremberg to sell his goods, which would have had to pass through 11 custom barriers and pay a customs duty of about 5% at each one of them. Look at the confusion which is involved in this merchandise, in this transport. He will have to pay at different places. Custom barriers will be there. So duties were often levied according to the weight or measurement of the goods, because 39 states were there. So according to the weight or measurement, duty was levied. And each region had their own system of weights and measures. It is not uniform. It is so funny, right? Each region had their own system. And this involved time-consuming calculation. The calculation was not at a fast pace. They had their own rules and it was very confusing. And not only that, it was time-consuming also. The measure of cloth, for example, was the L, which in each region stood for a different length. So in each place, the measurement was different. It was not uniform and standardized. An L of textile material bought in Frankfurt would get you 54.7 centimeter of cloth. In Mainz, 55.1 centimeter of cloth. There is no much difference, but still it is difference, right? In Nuremberg, it was 65. In Freiburg, it was 53. So look at that measurement itself. It was very difficult. It was very, very, very complicated. So it was not easy to carry on this trade also. So these kind of conditions were viewed. It was actually obstacles to the economic exchange and growth of the new commercial classes. The economic exchange and growth was hindered. They argued for the creation of a unified economic territory. They wanted a unified economic territory which allowed unhindered and easy transport of goods, people and capital. There shouldn't be any obstacles which will stop the further progress of this exchange, because the merchants are traveling over long distances. So when these kind of confusions come into being, it is difficult for them to even carry on their trade. In 1834, a customs union or Zollverein. This particular group was formed at the initiative of Prussia, and this was joined by most of the German states. It was to actually revise the rules for the merchants and for trade. The union, this particular union body, abolished tariff barriers. All these tariff barriers where the merchants will have to pay at different stations, that was abolished. It also reduced the number of currencies from over 30 to 2. 30 currencies were there. It was very difficult. Each region had their own currency. Can you imagine where you have to convert, you have to do the calculation? It was too difficult. So that got reduced from 30 to 2, just 2. The creation of a network of railways further stimulated mobility. So railways was created, harnessing economic interest to national unification. So because of railways, it actually facilitated economic interest itself within the people, which led to national unification. The final pivotal point is national unification. You should first have economic interest, and that is done only when we put up these measures. There was a wave of economic nationalism which was felt all around the region, and that strengthened and consolidated the wider nationalist sentiments growing at the time. It strengthened, everything strengthened, and finally you reach the unification. So because of all this economic nationalism that, no, we have to grow, we have to come up economically, that interest itself stimulated for an economic national interest, which further led to the national unification. So like that, the aim and objective of the revolutionaries were met after that. A new conservatism after 1815. What is that? Conservatism. After the defeat of Napoleon in 1815, European governments were driven by a spirit of conservatism, because already Napoleon was rigid. So now they had this conservative feeling. Fear was there. They did not actually encourage trying new methods. What is the meaning of this conservative belief? They believe that established traditional institutions of state and society, especially like monarchy, the church, social hierarchy means division, aristocratic, clergy, peasants, all these things, then property and family, all these things should be preserved. We shouldn't bring a change to all these things. That was the first point. Not to bring about any traditional changes in the traditional established norms. That is what the conservatives believed. We will look at the remaining points in the following videos. So stay tuned. So look through this conservatism point again and again. Okay.